Hi and welcome back to the channel. This is Rideshare Buddy UK. My name's Kevin and today's a short video because I'm going to show you why the national minimum wage guarantee that Uber offers and other rideshare offers, Bolt and various other ones offer, is not worth the paper it's written on, because you're still supporting low pay by having to spend your money, which should be part of the national minimum wage guarantee, on keeping your car running. The expenses do not cover the full price or the full cost of running a taxi. So let's have a quick look at what national minimum wage guarantee is, or the national living wage guarantee is. Uber say that's spread over a week. Your active time, which is your time from when you accept a job to when you drop off, that time is guaranteed to be at least national minimum wage. That's the legislation. That's what happened when we as drivers became workers. But there had to be some sort of simple way of calculating what the expenses are, because what they do is they total your mileage from that pickup to drop off over the week, assign a mileage cost, and then they add on things like congestion charges in London and ULEZ in London. London's a little bit different, but it's basically the same. You just get more expense than you do outside of London. And the decision that was came to with the low pay unit of the inland revenue is that the inland revenue fixed mileage allowance is the cost that needs to be used to determine the running costs of that job. And at the moment, provided you do less than 10,000 miles active time, you get 45p a mile. Then after you've done that 10,000 miles, your active time car costs drop down to 25p a mile. So for instance, March, April, at the end of the tax year, you're likely to have used up your 10,000 mile allowance. So a £10 job that's covering, say, 10 miles, of that £10, £2.50 is your car expense, and the £7.50 is your profit. If it's in June, before you run out of that 10,000 miles, then that £10 job will have a cost of £4.50, giving you a £5.50 profit on that job to spread over the time. So that's what it is. But where does this 450, where does this 45p and 25p come from? Well, it was never meant to cover the costs of running a taxi or private hire vehicle, because we have substantially more insurance than what this cost was set up for. And we have other things like medicals, licensing fees to pay, private hire fees to pay, and things like that. This set rate of 45p a mile and 25p a mile was set in place in 2011, 14 years ago. It hasn't moved since then. So 14 years ago, the taxman looked at the situation of if somebody who was working for a boss was required to use their car, what would be the running costs of that car, maybe a bit of a depreciation, your fuel costs, a little bit of extra by converting your insurance from domestic and pleasure to business domestic and pleasure. Just a little bit of extra. Certainly not the commercial insurance that we pay. Certainly did take into account having the car MOT twice a year in some places, having to pay licensing fee, driver's fees and things like that. Nothing of that was incorporated into that 45p and 25p. And the taxman decided at the time to front load the cost of, say, depreciation onto the car with a 45p a mile cost up to 10,000 miles. Then after that, evidently, particularly regarding the insurance, cost per mile would come down. So it's at 25p a mile. So that's where it's come from. That's where it originates from. It originates from an employee using their car occasionally for work. It was never set up to cover the full cost of running a private hire vehicle with the commercial hire and reward insurance, which is substantially more than having business added onto your or goes for business added onto your normal car insurance. So that was set up in 2011. Now, that's not changed since then. There's been no additions since then. Lots of people and campaign groups have been trying to get it raised. At the last budget, a lot of voluntary bodies, because the voluntary bodies use this as their mileage allowance to pay for volunteers. If they pay more than that, then the volunteer has to pay tax and national insurance because it's classed as income. So they tend to just pay this tax-free allowance. Lots of voluntary bodies now are finding it really difficult to recruit drivers because the cost of running a car as a volunteer, this is just a normal car, not a taxi, is not being met by the allowance. So they're having real difficulties recruiting people. The unions have campaigned against it. Small business organisations have campaigned about it. What small business organisations are finding out is that their members, when they ask their staff to use a car, they're refusing to use a car because the cost of the allowance, 45p a mile and 25p a mile, doesn't cover the actual costs of running just a normal car. Forget about the extra expenses of running a private hire taxi. Just a normal car isn't being covered, and them having to foot the bill out of their own earnings. So a lot of them are refusing to use their own car. So this is why there's this big campaign to try and update these allowances and bring it into line with inflation. So what should it be at if this allowance had kept up with inflation of normal inflation, not private hire car insurance inflation, which has come through the roof, but just normal motoring expense inflation? What would it be? Well, according to the ONS and the Bank of England, from 2011 through to 2024, last year, motoring expense inflation has been 38%. So, if that had been reflected in that allowance, today, that allowance would be worth 68 pence per mile for the first 10,000 miles, and about 38 pence per mile after 10,000 miles. So you can see big jump in difference there. And I would suggest that if you look at private hire, when you look at private hire fees, private hire plating, private hire MOTs, private hire insurance in particular, I would suggest that inflation is probably closer to 55%. I know of some people who are now paying double, triple, and even more in insurance than they were 10 years ago. And these figures are 14 years out of date. So that means the figures that the Inland Revenue has said Uber have got to use, and other rideshare, not just Uber, Bolt, and everybody else who now have worker status, they have to use a 45p a mile allowance and 25p a mile allowance. It probably only covers about 2/3 of the running costs, well, possibly even half of the running costs of a taxi in active miles, and the other half is coming out of your national minimum wage allowance. So you are paying out of your national minimum wage, and this is why it is so hard to earn national minimum wage on the taxes now. It's because the allowances that the taxman has told Uber, Bolt, Verizon and others to use do not cover the cost of running a private hire vehicle. So that's why I say this: the national living wage claims of rideshare companies are not worth the paper they're written on, And if we had an updated allowance of 68p a mile, a whole lot more drivers will be receiving national living wage top-ups, because the figures just don't add up. Today we're working on 14-year-old costs in 2025, and in 2025 it's a whole lot more expensive to run a car than it was back in 2011. So that's it. Thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed that little rant about why I've just laughed at the claims that drivers are guaranteed national living wage. You're not going to get it. The odds are stacked up against them. The figures that Inland Revenue has told Uber to use, totally distorted from the actual cost of running a private hire taxi, especially with the serious expenses now of insurance. I would suggest that, and remember, that's only from pick up, from when you accept the job to when you drop. If I took a job from here to Bristol Airport, I'd have to run all the way back from Bristol Airport, and none of that mileage is going to be contributed towards the national minimum wage guarantee, even though I've still got to come back. Yeah, it's laughable. Not worth it. Not worth the paper it's written on. Forget about all the claims. It's playing with figures. Taxman is on side with the Uber to make sure that it at least looks as though you're going to get national minimum wage, even though they know full well you're not going to get it. So that's it. Thanks for watching. Safe driving and have a good weekend.